Hi, everyone, and we are live, and we're going to discuss a very important topic. When it says in the Bible, when it says in the Torah, um, when it says in the Torah, eye for an eye, is that really what justice is all about? Uh, is the Bible so vicious and cruel? It seems like vengeance to poke out someone's eye because they poked out your eye, knock out a tooth because someone knocked out your tooth. We're going to discuss one of the most misunderstood verses in the Bible, and we're gonna come to some fascinating conclusions. So we're going to do this every Thursday, a different topic. So I hope you're going to tune in. This is the first live broadcast. So it's very, very exciting to see you all here. So let's jump right into it. So the book of Exodus says in chapter 21, verse 24, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a hand for a hand, a foot for a foot. So if someone hurts you, does that mean that you hurt them back? Is this biblical vengeance? It seems like ancient primitive justice from the West. So the Wild West. So let's get into this, understand what this means. What if this verse actually means something quite different? And it's the foundation for modern legal society, for human rights, for equality. I think you'd all be surprised. And stick with me for the next few minutes because I'm about to blow your mind. And these verses don't mean what you think they mean. So let's start with what everyone thinks an eye for an eye means. Of course, you're probably picturing an ancient courtroom where someone gouged out another person's eye, and that person comes in and they demand revenge. It's brutal, it's primitive. So they take out the guy who poked out his eye and they jab out his eye, right? Very brutal. But that is sort of the imagery that a lot of people have in their mind of what the Bible requires, brutal revenge. Honestly, that is what the verse does sound like on the surface: an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Exodus chapter 21, you can't really deny that. That is what it sounds like. So, case closed. I mean, we can end the class right now. We don't need to go any further. Is the Bible really promoting violent vigilante retaliation? Is that what it really means? So let's dig a little bit deeper. To understand this, we need to understand what the word tachat, or in place of, means. Eye for an eye in place of an eye. We need to understand what that Hebrew word means and the world, the context with which it was written in. So in the ancient world, we're talking, let's say, about 3,000 years ago, justice wasn't blind. It was based entirely on social status. So I'll give you an example. So if a very wealthy person, a nobleman, injured someone who is a peasant, then the punishment for that nobleman was very, very light. After all, he was on a much higher level in society. He was on a higher status. So he didn't receive the same punishment as, say, the opposite. If you had a peasant who injured someone who was high society, very wealthy, a noble person, that peasant could literally face the death penalty. So for the exact same thing. In other words, if a wealthy fellow injured a poor man, or the poor man injured the wealthy person in literally the exact same way, the wealthy person would not face nearly the same justice as the poor person. That's the society that existed a few thousand years ago. In fact, this is in one of the earliest codes of law called the Code of Hammurabi. And in the Code of Hammurabi, it really lays out different laws for different classes, right? Depends what class you belong to, then the law will apply to you differently than to another class. And there was another problem in the ancient world. There was escalating violence. Violence was everywhere. Unlike today, where we have, legal systems, justice system, jails, violence was everyone. What would happen? You would kill someone, and then they would come back and try to kill you. And if they did, and then your family would then wage war against that family, and it would continue to escalate. There'd be no proportionality. There would be blood feuds between families, blood feuds between clans. This is justice in the ancient world. I don't know if you've watched Game of Thrones, kind of like that idea. And the violence would escalate. One person would hurt another. That person would hurt them back. And then the family would come after them and vice versa. And it would completely escalating. There was no proportional justice in the ancient world. So number one, it went by class system, like in the Hammurabi Code. Number two, there was no proportionality. So it was in this world that the Torah, that the Bible introduces a very radical idea, and that is an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. And let's try to understand what I'm talking about and what this means. So what is the verse actually doing? It was really establishing three absolutely revolutionary principles. The verse was teaching us three incredible revolutionary ideas. Stick with me. Number one, equality, right? Everyone means everyone. The law applied equally, whether you were a nobleman, whether you were a peasant, whether you were rich, whether you were poor, whether you were a man, whether you were a woman. The law was meant to be applied equally. Everyone was equal before the law. Number two, proportionality. Punishment has to fit the crime, no more and no less. So if someone would take out your eye, then it seems the equivalent response is an eye for an eye. Not life for an eye, not kill your entire family for an eye, but the escalation, right? There'd be no escalation, it would be proportional. And three, there would be a limitation, right? The verse is putting a cap on revenge, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, and that's the end of it, right? It would close the circle. It wouldn't be an eye for an eye, and then the family comes back and they attack your family, and then one family attacks another, but it would be exactly limited. So there would be equality, proportionality, and limitation. So, but here's the thing, all right? You might be thinking, and I'm sure most of you are, so does that mean that they took out an eye? Okay, that's right. If one guy knocked out an eye, another guy took out another eye, true. That would be equality. That would be proportional, and that would put a limit on it. But the Torah, the Bible, was never literally meant to be, it was never meant to be taken literally in this sense. It is not at all talking about literally knocking out someone's eye because they took out your eye, or a tooth because they knocked out a tooth, or chop off someone's hand because they chopped off your hand. That is not what the verse means. Now you might be saying to yourself, what do you mean that's not what the verse means? That is literally what the verse says: an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, hand for an hand. So I am now going to give you 4 ideas, 4 proofs to show you that that's not what this verse literally means. And it's going to be a knockout punch. I see I got a shalom from Columbus, Georgia in the comments there. Thank you. Shalom to you as well. So 4 proofs why this verse does not literally mean an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, but rather it's speaking about compensation, financial compensation for someone, who injures another person. Now, how do we know this? Like I said, I'm going to give you 4 proofs. So stick with me. Okay, proof number 1. Okay, and this is logical. Okay, our first proof is going to be the logical impossibility of the verse meaning that. So let me give you an example that's taken from the ancient Jewish discussions found in the Talmud. It says, well, if we take this verse literally, let's say for a moment that it's meant to be taken literally, right? Well, what happens if a blind person knocks out someone's eye? What do we do then? Do we knock out his eye? But he's already blind. That wouldn't seem to be quite just. Question number 2. What if someone with one eye injures someone with 2 eyes? Do you take out their only eye, making them completely blind, even though the victim would have one eye left? That wouldn't seem to be proportional. 3, what if a tall person injures a short person, or a strong person injures a weak person? How do you make sure that injuries exactly are equal when a person's body is completely different, right? And so the verse seems to open itself up to all these logical questions. So the answer is, folks, to these theoretical questions, that you can't. You can never make punishments that could actually be exactly equal. And this whole premise of the verse really doesn't stand up to scrutiny, meaning that it has to be speaking about something else. But stick with me, folks, all the way to the end, because I'm painting a picture. We're creating a tapestry. It's all going to come together. Just stick with me. So proof number 1, or point number 1, is logically, this verse, it doesn't really work. Okay. So now let's go to proof number 2. And this one is a little bit stronger. The Hebrew language. And I know many of you who are watching this don't speak Hebrew, don't even read Hebrew, and maybe don't even recognize the Hebrew alphabet. But folks, there's a problem, because the Hebrew Bible was written in Hebrew. The original, the Tanakh, the language of the Bible, is Hebrew. And if you don't understand the Hebrew, then you're simply reading the Bible through a translation. You're not directly relating to the Word of God. So what does the Hebrew actually say here? It says ayin, which means an eye, tachat, in place of, ayin, an eye. The Hebrew word tachat here doesn't mean, as sometimes the English translates, as an eye for an eye. It really means instead of, or in place of. It's a word of substitution. It doesn't mean that you take out an eye because someone knocked out an eye. So I can give you examples of this, right? How do we know that this is true? Well, you have to look at other places in the Tanakh, in the Bible, where the word tachat appears, right? So here in our verse, it says it 4 times. An eye, tachat, an eye, a tooth, tachat, a tooth, a hand, tachat, a hand, and a foot, tachat, in place of a foot. But where else do we see this? So we see this as well in the book of Numbers. I'm going to flip my Bible there. Chapter 3, verse 12. In the book of Numbers, what does it say there? It says, God is speaking, and he says, I have taken the Levites from among the children of Israel in place of, or tachat, every firstborn, meaning that the Levites are replacing the firstborn. So it's not a literal 1-for-1 exchange, eye for an eye, but it means that something is replacing the eye that has the value of an eye. You follow what I'm saying, folks? Tell me in the comments if you understand. The word tachat means something that's in place of it, not the actual item itself. So when it says an eye, tachat, an eye, it means of something that has the value of it. Okay? Now, if the Torah, if the Bible literally wanted to say you gouge out someone's eye because they took out someone's eye, right? What would it, the Hebrew word would not be tachat. Okay, so the Torah has other words when it means a literal replacement, but the word tachat is not the one it would have used. Okay, for those who don't speak Hebrew, you're going to have to take my word for it. I apologize, but that's what the Hebrew means. So that's proof number 2. Again, to review, proof number 1 is that logically, you cannot literally take an eye for an eye. Like I said, what if someone was blind and they took out someone's eye? It wouldn't be equal. It wouldn't be fair. Number 2 is the Hebrew itself demonstrates it. Now, here is the bombshell proof. Okay, here we go. Okay, I see some of the comments. I don't know your name. Sorry, sir. It says M Stone 59. I see you're with me. Great. I love it. Here is the bombshell proofs. Here we go. Okay, it says in chapter 20, verse 24 in the book of Exodus, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, hand for a hand, leg for a leg. Okay, and then it continues in the next verse, right? Continues other things, burn for a burn, and so on. But take a look at the very next verses 26. Listen to what it says. If a man shall strike the eye of his slave or the eye of his maidservant and destroy it. Okay, I'm going to stop reading the verse right there. It says, if you knock out the eye of your servant, okay, what should the rest of the verse say? It should say, your eye should be gouged out. That's justice. But what does the verse say? He shall set him free in return for his eye. Okay? It uses the exact same Hebrew word. It says tachat, right? In place of his eye, you set him free, right? That is the ultimate proof that the previous verse that says an eye tachat, another eye, cannot literally be talking about gouging an eye, because the Bible gives you an example of it in verse 26. If you gouge out the eye of your servant, what does it say? It doesn't say we gouge out your eye. It says we let him go free. Tachat, same Hebrew word, in place of, as a substitute for the injury that you did to him. That would be, boom, case closed, drop the mic. Okay, that would be the third and ultimate proof there that eye for an eye cannot literally mean an eye for an eye. It has to mean something else. Okay, and the fourth and final proof is practical justice. What do I mean by that? Right? How is it possible, right, that you can apply, if you're going to take it literally, an eye for an eye, right? What if someone damages your eye, but he doesn't fully blind you? Okay, you lose 50% of your sight. How are we possibly going to take that other person who caused the damage and have them lose 50% of their sight? You can't replicate the injury to the offender in the same way of exactly what he did to the other person. So it's not practically possible, right? It's different than proof number one that we said, okay, proof number one, when we spoke about that there would be cases that it would be impossible to apply. Here, what we're talking about, it even in a case where a guy knocked out another guy's eye but not fully, there would be no way to practically apply this. It would be impossible. So what can we do? What does this verse really mean? Now that we've given you 4 ideas, 4 proofs that this verse can literally mean to knock out an eye. So what does it mean? So here we go. Hang on, folks. So there are 5 things. You count them. 5. Count them with me. There are 5 things that the Torah, that the Bible is referring to here, as explained for thousands of years by the great sages. They say there are 5 categories of compensation. Okay, 1 is that you have to compensate someone for the damage they've done, for the pain they've caused, for medical costs that they had to incur, lost wages, meaning they couldn't go to work because of the injury, and 5 is embarrassment. Right? If you cause them embarrassment because of the injury. These 5 things, they are literally the foundation of modern law, of personal injury. Okay, do you understand what I just told you? This verse in the Bible, this is how it's been interpreted for thousands of years. These 5 categories: damage, pain, medical cost, lost wages, and embarrassment. Those are the 5 things that if you cause this kind of damage, that you are liable for. And they have to be assessed by a court, right? The Torah Bible isn't inventing brutality, an eye for an eye, but what it is inventing here is a wonderful justice system. Okay, so let's bring this all together, folks. Let's bring it all together. We're coming to the end in just a minute. Okay, you like that, Margie? I like that. Yes, with an exclamation point. Okay, so the Torah is teaching us, listen to the genius, the brilliance of God's word, right? It's teaching us, right, that why does it say eye for an eye? Why does it call it that? Why does it really mean that? Because it's teaching us the idea of equal justice under the law, meaning your eye, whether you're a king, a nobleman, or a beggar, a peasant, or poor, it has the same value as mine. Everyone's eye has the same value, right? An eye for an eye. It wasn't like the ancient world, like we said at the beginning, where if you were very wealthy and you knocked out the eye of a guy who was poor, then okay, you weren't really responsible on the same level if it were the opposite. Right? The Torah is teaching us, when it uses the word eye for an eye, it's teaching us that everyone is equal in the eyes of God. Number 2 is that it has to be proportional consequences, meaning the response to the harm has to fit the harm. It doesn't mean we knock out his eye, but let's say you injure a guy and you broke his arm and he was out of work for 6 weeks. Okay. We don't say that we're gonna fine you $100 million. No, it's got to be proportional. An eye for an eye, an arm for an arm. Proportional compensation, measured, appropriate. Okay. So the verse, like I said, didn't create brutality. It ended brutality. It ended brutality. It took a world of arbitrary violence, class-based injustice, endless vengeance, and replaced it with equality, with limits, and actual justice. Okay, this is powerful. So here's the deeper question. If it always meant compensation, why does it use the dramatic language of eye for an eye? Why not just say, pay compensation for injuries? It would have been a lot simpler. Because the Torah, the Bible, God's word is communicating both the principle and the practice. Okay, so what does that mean? The language, when I say an eye for an eye, it's preserving the moral weight of it, meaning it's saying, in theory, the morality of the moral response is that it has to be proportional. If I took out someone's eye, theoretically, I should lose my eye. Okay, in other words, it's giving us the moral backbone, but in practice, it's telling us something different, right? That it's compensation, but it's preserving the moral principle. So if I take out someone's eye, the severity, it's as if you should have your eye taken out. You can't minimize it. You can't dismiss that. But the truth is, the compensation is the way it plays itself out practically. So really, it's really brilliant, these verses. The verse holds 2 ideas at once: the moral absolute and the moral absolute that human beings are equal and sacred, and the practical wisdom that it's about healing, it's about justice. Okay, so I hope this makes sense. Yes, that's exactly right, Shelley. This is the foundation of modern tort law. Okay, it's very powerful. So just to conclude, so the next time that you hear someone say that eye for an eye justifies revenge or retaliation, tell them that they have it backwards. The verse, which is written 4,000 years ago, 3,500 years ago, created equality under the law, proportional justice, compensation for victims. It's in the United States Constitution. It's in our courts. It's in Western law. It's the reason, by the way, that we have civil lawsuits, right? It's all based on these ideas. Not bad for a few Hebrew words. So, my friends, I would kindly ask you to, if you're not already, subscribe to the channel. It should be right down there. Subscribe, give it a like, and we'll be sending out messages each week. I'm going to try to go live every Thursday. If you enjoyed this, let me know in the comments. And if there's other things you want me to discuss, drop them in the comments. And thank you all for being here tonight. And may God bless you all.